calls subjective individuation. On this equitable syncretistic basis, I could then understand the simple mental image of one's own biological sex, generically considered, as now itself constituting an inner representational personification, which could then be metaphorically said to be the personal twin, or archetypal double of one's physically embodied sexual gender. Accordingly, in men, an inner penile brother to the contrasexual anima as vaginal sister, and with whom, through heartfelt homosexual romance, wholesome personal relations with the archetypal psyche could go generously, verdantly forward via salutarily operative soul-figure dynamics. I called my resulting master's thesis Gay Depth Psychology. In discovering this novel symbolic understanding homosexually, I felt sweepingly transported into a newly encompassing dimensionalization of expansive universal value and motoric substantifying purpose, both psychological and political, regarding estimable gay love, identity, and liberation. Jungian analysis, in addition to generally appreciating the modern humanistic idea of subjective self, or what I might here call personhood, that I had already incorporated from my earlier studies, goes daringly further within that respectful intellectual tradition to take completely seriously the phenomenological experience of still deeper symbolic meanings, of the strange and amazing mythic and mystical dimensions, of that veritable magic and transcendental spirit which most emphatically reside energically within the livingness of human subjectivity itself, those specially glowing features of life's meaningful experience which preciously hold our deepest values and highest ideals, where the sincerest fundamental truths and august wonders are finally well forged for the salubrious actualization of necessary human possibilities through the hallowed constitutive process of inestimable self-realization, ultimately the worthiest fulfillment or completest fruition knowingly of that core human soul, referentially understood to be the archetypal source of all life and vital inspiration in felt subjective experience, as the truly finest flower of richest awakening personhood, a marvelous, uplifting sensibility I had always intuitively been quite sweetly drawn to, even after disgustedly ceasing to be any kind of religious believer at the volatile age of 13, but that now stood freshly revealed in thoughtful, erotic horizons of fantastic, mythical grandeur and unfathomable human potentiality. What well psychologically amounted to an enlightening union of my homosexual identity and initiatory archetypal psyche, fruitfully mediated interiorly by my conceptual discovery of a gay-centered Jungian synthesis, honestly speaking, felt simply, ecstatically miraculous, an epically satisfying alternative to both traditional spirituality and modern secularism in becoming and being a fully meaningful human person who was sincerely, liberatedly, same-sex loving. I suchwise came entrancedly under that marvelous influence of the awesome numinosum, the towering transcendental power of the psychic archetypes, by phasic developmental degrees relationally to a fuller scope of purposeful meaning and irresistible feeling entirely unanticipated, which drew me to investigate through apposite analogy to parallel figures from the historically recorded past how it seemed amplificationally that the homosexual spirit power had actually been previously widely recognized as a great magician and mystical guide, a powerful shaman, a masterful alchemist, an expert transformer of the elemental stuff of psychic being, the inner world, the dream time, the spirit land. Plato and the Orphics called him Eros. Egyptians named him Taputi, Sumerians Enki, European alchemists Mercurius. I accordingly discovered him to be not only a beautifully sexy man, but also a universal wheel of mystic fire, as well as the realizationally completed sacred androgyne, who there so incarnatedly holds the pivotal mystery of the cosmic opposites, the secrets of life and death. This great originative enigma was what driven Dr. Frankenstein zealously sought to solutionally answer in the bold experiment to make his autogenetic creature. This indeed was the noble mystical goal of King Gilgamesh's heroic journey across the poisonous waters of death after his loving partner had miserably died. And this is likewise what I also most arousingly felt I was really revelatorily pursuing in my gay Jungian explorations, the very most secret of essential homosexual life. I became quite richly inflated unconsciously with these meaningfully grand notions of a mythic origin story, accordingly reveling in soaring rhapsodic union with the concordantly aroused transpersonal, almost as if I was myself a godlike being. And so naturally enough, such a lofty personal identification before too long, not unexpectedly, except for me at the time, then consequently resulted in just as substantially big of a valuational fall. I excitedly rushed to complete my new thesis, even as fresh words kept tumbling out in a giddy surge. So going on further to now finish a larger manuscript still more ambitiously called Notes Toward a Gay Psychology, of which gay death psychology was just the penultimate chapter. After this big opus was soon enough finally completed, however, a peculiar and unexpected change affectedly set in. Seemingly for no reason, and with increasingly alarming frequency, I started experiencing surprisingly difficult panic attacks while in regular social situations, and presently a quite dreadful feeling spread through me that these puzzlingly commanding subjective assaults emanated from a mortal enemy of immaterial constitution, who was thus so now actually implacably hunting me down personally, an unyielding, demonic being or force who demanded no less than my very death. I intellectually knew that these growingly tangible fantasies were not, of course, otherwise real, yet as they autonomously assumed increasingly heated form, I inexorably grew to ominously conclude that by my having so involvingly played around investigatively with what I had inductionally discovered to indeed be the very real powers of the independently living psyche, as so sweetly seduced by homosexual romantic love, richly valuatively amplified through respectfully contextualizing Jungian thought, that a much greater awesomeness had truly been therein activationally, very materially and individually summoned, which was in stark existential fact no longer in any moving way ecstatic, but instead quite horribly, queasily baleful. Now I felt it ruthlessly closing in on me more and more tightly, and absolutely nothing I tried doing to ward off this otherwise fantastical, squeezing doom made any practical difference. I only grew increasingly preoccupationally terrified. Fortunately, at a certain straitened point, I then, in another intuitive burst, desperately turned to a man who would become, along with his longtime companion, one of the first out-gay persons to be certified as a Jungian analyst, David Stockford, and entered systematic analysis with him. There I gradually learned to protectively manage and engagingly partner the fiercely threatening experiences hotly erupting from my agitated psyche, and which, as I did this, now unanticipatedly proceeded to alchemically transform me from the inside out. Through such an authentically pursued inner work, I compositionally underwent that profound self-initiation of the substantive reconstitutional sort which ancient Egyptians analogically likened to the sun's transfiguring passage generatively through the 12 gates of the baneful underworld at night. I thereby learned full well that my first approach to Jungian psychology and its idea of ensoulment had been mainly just afterwards and progressive concepts. Indeed, that my entire engagement with psychology, and even myself, until then, had been but only a suitable enough preparation, And now I was unmitigatedly shown the far more tangible reality of what Jung called the objective psyche, in no uncertain revelatory terms, through what ominously amounted impactfully to an earth-shattering confrontation with these still unresolved unconscious conflicts, steep moral inferiority, horribly incapacitated feeling, and their tremendous transpersonal implications, which Jung characterized metaphorically as the dim shadow of one's conscious ego personality. My resulting initiatory education was most thoroughly rectificational and convincing. As I devotedly worked through and so progressively deepened my inner process of this transmutational self-engagement during the next several years, I saw myself gradually move away from my earlier professional associations and also from foregrounding formal theory, to instead more directly explore the improved psychological embodiment of gay archetypal actualities, as I wholeheartedly took up a whole new direction in my everyday pragmatic life. I became a sort of novice shaman, an acolyte alchemist, to what I now idealistically considered realistically to be an archetypally sourced gay spirit, and its beneficent evolutionary unfolding in myself and communally. Eventually, this fresh comprehensional approach led me to produce a new series of formulational essays published in 1980 as Visionary Love, a spirit book of gay mythology and transmutational theory, and to my friendship with Harry Hay, which began in 1976. Harry, a seminal figure in the early American gay liberation movement, was the first man I ever met who seemed to appreciatively see into those wonderfully depthful reaches of vibrant gay spirit and consequent gay-centered understanding, which I had also discovered psychologically so feelingly through my cumulative alchemical initiations in becoming a better realized homosexual person. And on that deeply warm basis, which Harry fully reciprocated, I immediately felt intimately bonded with him fraternally to more so explore gay male self-realization as an archetypal and political truth in the better actualizational service of our greater human liberation and finer enriching fulfillment as upright gay individuals and a distinctive gay people, in caring, contributive relation with the worthy whole of humankind. In this germinative context of growing affection and fellowship on such a regardfully extended scale of caring mutuality, I discovered the rich inscribed history of that gay-centered thought first introduced to me by my earlier political activism and beneficial association with Don Clark. That is, homosexual writers overtly exploring the basic nature and possible meaning of gay identity and a homosexual perspective as the source of existential being and epistemological knowing, in modern times, most notably from Walt Whitman and Carl Ulrichs, and their precursors, through Edward Carpenter and Gerald Hurd to Harry himself, and now to my own budding gay experience and intellectual practice. This great cultural tradition is the main historic source of today's gay identity politics and its ethnic homosexual consciousness. It provides the intellectual spine for the modern gay liberation movement and all we have justly achieved as gay people. Now proudly intending to help carry this noble cultural tradition farther into the new emancipatory terrain of a gay-centered myth of initiatory subjective meaning, Harry and I, along with John Burnside and Don Kilhefner, publicly called together the first spiritual conference of radical fairies in 1979, which has since spontaneously given birth to a grassroots type of ongoing worldwide religious movement. In eagerly working with Harry and the other fairy activists to actualize gay spirit more extensively, however, I unfortunately soon enough discovered, disconcertingly, that there was very little practical appreciation for the psychologically unconscious shadow side of human subjectivity, which I had come to realize was really quite omnipresent intransigently. Such that, as would always be the case, everybody unreflectively tended to simply act out psychologically from their unprocessed inner defenses and complexities, in extroverted group situations with deleterious results and no attempt at self-awareness, in spite of a generally proclaimed allegiance to gay archetypes and gay mind. It turned out that I was the only one of the organizers present who had attained any serious psychological understanding of such distaff moral matters as defensive reenactments present ubiquitously in the operative subjective moment, when I would then try to conscientiously raise such crucial concerns with my fellow organizers. No matter how carefully and self-revealingly, I was regularly met by dissociated obliviousness, defensive attack, hostile projection, and shameless denial. Yet,